Ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. Thank you so much for being here. I know a few people are still going to be coming into the audience. I so much appreciate what we're about to do now is we're going to have to adapt. Our speaker had to unfortunately adapt because his flight was canceled. Robbie George from Princeton University was not able to be here personally. However, because of Skype and the miracles of modern technology, he's still going to be able to deliver his remarks. And to introduce him for the occasion, I would like to bring Annette Kirk forward. Annette has been a partner to this conference for the last 3 days. She and I have been hosting all of our guest speakers, and we've been most grateful to all of you who have participated. Annette's been a wonderful partner in her own right, and we so appreciate our partnership with you, Annette, and the Russell Kirk Center for Cultural Renewal. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to bring you forward. Please give Annette Kirk a warm welcome.
Good evening. Dale, the Russell Kirk Center is pleased to be a partner in sponsoring this summit on the liberal arts. For decades, Russell wrote articles and columns warning of the increasing politicalization of the academy. His book, Decadence and Renewal in the Higher Learning, is a history of how American education developed and decayed in the 20th century. Thus, he would have appreciated the attention that this topic is being given during this summit. Our speaker tonight, Robbie P. George, is the McCormick Professor of Jurisprudence and Director of the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institutions at Princeton University. Professor George has served on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and on the President's Council on Bioethics. Currently, Dr. George is chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom and is a member of UNESCO's World Commission on Ethics of Scientific Knowledge and Technology, and also a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. Professor George has a D.Phil from Oxford and a J.D. from Howard University. Because this event is being held as part of the Common Ground Initiative, it is noteworthy that Professor George actively engages in these efforts. For instance, for some years, Dr. George has been teaching seminars with his friend and colleague, Cornel West, a leading liberal public intellectual. The George-West collaboration has been widely hailed as an example of how scholars can work together and how in their across ideological lines of division to enhance the quality of higher education. 2, a liberal Supreme Court Justice, Elena Kagan, praised George as one of the nation's most respected legal theorists, saying that the respect he has gained was due to his sheer brilliance, the analytical power of his arguments, and the range of his knowledge. Lest anyone conclude from this litany of his academic and public involvements that Robbie, as he is referred to by his friends and foes alike, spends all his days in serious scholarship and discussions, the record shows that he has also a wonderful sense of humor and, since his teens, has performed at county fairs and bluegrass festivals as a banjo player. Professor George's talk tonight is entitled, "Is There a Cure for Campus Illiberalism?" Professor George.
Well, thanks, everyone, and I do apologize for not being there with you. I suppose I shouldn't be apologizing since it's not my fault, but I do very much regret that I'm not there with you. Annette, thank you for that very kind introduction. It's been ages since I've seen you in person, and it was one of the things I was looking forward to. So I regret that we're not able to be together, and I hope another opportunity presents itself soon. Thanks to the folks at the university and at the initiative, the Common Ground Initiative, for inviting me to join. I'm particularly sorry that I missed other presentations today that I would have had the opportunity to hear. So my talk is, as Annette said, on the topic of whether there's a cure for campus illiberalism. It's good from time to time for academics to reflect together, as we're doing now, on what we do or what we're supposed to be doing and why we do it. So I'm grateful to all of our hosts and to supporters, financial supporters, for making it possible for us to gather for that purpose as part of the Common Ground Initiative. Now, I'm an old-fashioned person with old-fashioned views. I believe that colleges and universities have three fundamental purposes: the pursuit of knowledge, the preservation of knowledge securely obtained, and the transmission of knowledge. Of course, there are other desirable ends that colleges and universities legitimately seek, while also pursuing fundamental ends that I indicated. But these three, in my view, really are fundamental. They're constitutive, defining purposes of academic institutions. All the other things institutions legitimately do, such institutions legitimately do, are founded upon them. And anything they do that undermines these purposes, they should not be doing. So, for example, though I support college athletics, I support them only insofar as they don't damage the academic program, the transmission of knowledge. When or to the extent that they harm the academic program, they need to be reformed. If reform isn't feasible, abolish. Now, we've gathered this evening, you there and I coming by the magic of technology, to ask ourselves as academics whether we have a problem. It's kind of a little family get-together, ask whether we have a problem. The title of our summit is, Have the Liberal Arts Become Too Politicized? Well, since I'm breaking into a discussion that began last night, it has been going on all day for all of you, and since I'm not there myself in person, I won't presume to know whether anything approaching a consensus on this matter has been reached thus far. Rather, I'll state my own opinion, which is that we do indeed have a problem. And that problem manifests itself today most vividly in the phenomenon of campus illiberalism. Now, by that I mean the unwillingness of so many members of college and university communities to entertain or even really to listen to arguments that challenge the opinions that they happen to hold, whether the opinions have to do with climate science, affirmative action, racial preferences, abortion, the sanctity of human life, welfare policy, marriage and sexual morality, U.S. foreign and defense policy, the international economic order, or the origins of human consciousness. That's just a partial list of topics. Speaking invitations to dissenters from campus orthodoxies are not issued, or if they are issued, dissenting speakers end up being disinvited under pressure from opponents of their views. Or if they are not disinvited, they are pressured to withdraw under the threat of disruptive forms of protest. Or if they do not withdraw, they are interrupted by abusive protesters and even shouted down. And it's not just visitors to campuses. Faculty and student dissenters within campus communities are subjected to abuse sometimes and intimidation. It seems that every effort is made to ensure that they are denied opportunities to speak their minds or are intimidated into silence. I don't want to paint too broad a brush here, though. The situation is better or worse at different institutions. As it happens, it's not at all bad at my own institution. I'm entering my 30th happy year at Princeton, where I've never been subjected to intimidation or abuse, though threats from off campus have been made against me, one of which landed the perpetrator in a federal prison, and threats have been made against Princeton for having me on its faculty. But you all know the cases that I have in mind at colleges and universities around the country. In referring to these cases of campus illiberalism, you may have noticed that I spoke of this illiberalism as the way the problem I am concerned about, I quote myself now, manifests itself most vividly today, unquote. In other words, the denial of speaking opportunities, the disinviting of speakers due to their opinions, the disruption of meetings, the shouting down of dissenting speakers, are what get the public attention, the news media's interest. But these are merely some manifestations. The core of the problem, it seems to me, is this. Many institutions are letting the side down when it comes to the transmission of knowledge by failing to ensure that our students at every level are confronted with or exposed to and have the opportunity to consider the best that's to be said on competing sides of all questions that are in dispute among reasonable people of goodwill. They are permitting prevailing opinions on campus to harden into orthodoxies that often go unchallenged or largely unchallenged, leaving students with a false belief that there are, in fact, no disputes on these matters, at least among reasonable people of goodwill. At the core of the problem is the toxic thing that provides an environment in which illiberalism flourishes and can be expected to manifest itself in the ways it manifests itself today, namely the phenomenon of groupthink. Now, we fail to understand the depth of the problem or appreciate the danger it poses to intellectual life if we take an essentially static view of knowledge, supposing that knowledge is a matter of passing information to the mind of the recipient who records it there and draws on it as needed. This is worse than an oversimplification to conceive knowledge in that static way. The transmission of knowledge very often goes beyond the acquisition of information or skills and requires the engagement of the knowledge seeker with competing perspectives and points of view. It also requires certain virtues, including open-mindedness, respect for what John Stuart Mill called liberty of thought and discussion, requires intellectual humility, that is, humility of the sort one can possess only insofar as one appreciates and not merely notionally one's own fallibility. And then, of course, the virtue of love of truth. It's the task of colleges and universities, precisely as institutions of learning, to expose students to competing points of view and to foster in them those virtues that are necessary for the knowledge-seeking, truth-seeking, wisdom-seeking enterprise. That's necessary not because there are no truths to be attained, but rather because the pursuit of truth and the deeper appropriation of truths and meaning and significance requires. You see then that whatever is to be said about claims of the predominance of certain views and components on campus and the exclusion of others, the problem I'm calling attention to here is less about unfairness than it is about the need to avoid and where it has set in to overcome groupthink in order to fulfill a constitutive purpose of academic institutions. We owe that to our students, and we owe it to them whether they like it or not. It's a scandal when students graduated liberal arts colleges, university liberal arts programs, with no understanding, or worse yet, grotesque misunderstandings of the arguments advanced by serious people, scholars, who dissent from campus orthodoxies on issues such as those I mentioned a few minutes ago. Even if the opinions the students happen to have acquired in an environment of, come to call political correctness, happen to be true, students' ignorance of the arguments of dissenters will prevent them from understanding the truth as deeply as they should and actually appropriating it. That is to say, understanding it and understanding why it is so, and why competing views have nevertheless attracted the attention and even the allegiance of serious people. I believe it was the great early 20th century jurist Learned Haynes who said that the spirit of liberty is the spirit of being not too sure one is right. In making that, the judge wasn't endorsing radical skepticism or relativism or anything of that Rather, Judge Hand was pointing to the need for the virtue of intellectual humility in light of the inescapable reality of human fallibility. His focus was on the need for that recognition and its corresponding virtue in the project of establishing and maintaining public government and respect for freedom, personal and political. But what he says about the spirit of liberty is also true of the spirit of truth-seeking. That is, what is needed is a sense of one's own fallibility, a sense that one can be wrong even in one's basic premises and most fundamental beliefs, an openness of mind, a willingness to entertain criticism and to engage critics. All of these things are essential to the truth-seeking, knowledge-seeking, wisdom-seeking project. And that means that they must be cultivated. These virtues must be cultivated as part of the culture of institutions whose mission includes pursuit and transmission of knowledge. Now, none of this is to say that we should not be advocates of our points of view, or that we professors should not be engaged politically. I would be a gross hypocrite at best if I were to suggest any such thing. I myself am highly engaged politically, always from my academic colleague's point of view on the wrong side. Now, there are people who see political engagement as incompatible with scholarly vocation. My friend and mentor, Harry Frankfurt, a distinguished philosopher at Princeton, inclines to that view. But I'm afraid he hasn't persuaded me of it. So I have no problem with scholars speaking out on political issues and getting involved in political causes. I do myself all the time. But politically engaged scholars, like all scholars, need to be highly cognizant of their own fallibility, even on matters about which they care deeply, and even when it comes to causes in which they are profoundly emotionally invested. Even in our role as advocates, we must cultivate humility and a willingness to entertain the other guy's arguments in a serious way. None of us must ever imagine that he can't possibly be wrong about this or that cherished conviction, or that one's political adversaries and intellectual critics cannot possibly be right. That quickly becomes fanaticism, and it's fatal to the truth-seeking enterprise. I myself think the proper attitude for us to hold, to cultivate, is the attitude Plato teaches us to adopt, especially in the Gorgia. Socrates' attitude in that dialogue strikes me as exactly the one we need to emulate if we're going to be good scholars and teachers, faithful to our mission, faithful to our vocation as scholars and teachers. We must always be on the lookout for and be open to the true friend, what I call the true friend. That is to say, the person who will confer upon us the inestimable benefit of showing us that we are in error, where in fact we are in error, but of course don't know it until we engage with the friend. The true friend, in correcting our mistakes, does us no harm, but rather does us the very best service, the best possible service. Such a friend is to be esteemed and honored, praised, even venerated. We need to see that, and we need to help our students to see that. The person who sees his intellectual adversary as an enemy to be defeated, rather than as a friend joined with him dialectically in the pursuit of a common aim, namely knowledge of the truth, is already off the rails. He's in grave danger of falling into the ditch of sophistry. So openness to argument, openness to having one's premises and most fundamental beliefs, values challenged, is vitally important to the knowledge-seeking mission that defines liberal arts institutions and professional schools that share the knowledge-seeking aspirations of of liberal arts institutions as the kinds of things they are. A spirit of openness, argument, and challenge, where it flourishes in an academic culture, is what immunizes academic institutions against groupthink and chases the groupthink away when it comes knocking at the door. Now, part of the problem, of course, is that once groupthink has taken hold, folks who are caught up in it usually don't recognize the problem. I mean, when is the last time you met somebody who said to you, well, yeah, you know, what my problem is that I'm caught up in groupthink. I just think like everybody else around me thinks. People don't usually say things like that. I've heard someone say that only once in my life, as a matter of fact, and she didn't put it quite that starkly. The trouble with groupthink is that when you're in it, you generally don't know you're in it. You may realize that not everyone shares your views, but you'll be tempted to suppose that those who dissent from them are irrational or ill-motivated. You'll imagine that anyone who disagrees with you is a rube or a bigot or a tool of nefarious interests, a fool or a fraud. When someone is caught up in groupthink, he can pass the lie detector test, claiming that he is not in groupthink. But of course, that doesn't mean he's not in groupthink. And whatever ideological orthodoxies settle into place, whenever, wherever ideological orthodoxies settle into place in any institution, and where they're not subjected to serious questions and challenges at some level, in some way, you really do have to worry about groupthink setting in. That's opening the door to it. And that's true whether or not campus illiberalism manifests itself in the more visible ways we're now seeing so frequently, with dissenting speakers being excluded from campus or being shouted down or what have you. Now, it seems to me that viewpoint diversity, or what we might call in an academic setting intellectual diversity, has its value as a kind of vaccine against groupthink and as an antidote to groupthink when it begins to set in. Diversity of viewpoint, approaches, diversity of arguments, beliefs, and the like, is, it seems to me, the real cure for campus liberalism. That's the answer to my question. People who have the spirit of being not too sure that they are right, people who want to be challenged because they know that challenging and being challenged are integral and indispensable to the process of truth-seeking. Such people, whatever their own personal views, will want intellectual diversity on campus in order for the institution to accomplish its mission. Now, of course, we all know that it's pretty hard these days to actually get the intellectual diversity I'm claiming we need. And I think there are a number of reasons for that, reasons that I gather you've been exploring today. We'll explore tomorrow. While in my own experience it's true, and some of my more liberal colleagues tell me that in their experience it's true, that there is sometimes blatant, conscious, obviously deliberate discrimination against people who dissent from campus orthodoxies when it comes to hiring or promotion or admission or what have you. I happen to think myself that blatant, conscious, deliberate discrimination is not part of our problem. My friend here at Princeton, Jeffrey Stout, a noted scholar of religion and politics, who is an unbeliever, as it happens in matters of religion, and a liberal in politics, has mentioned disturbing experiences that he has personally had in relation to academic selection committees. He reports that twice in meetings, it was openly said by some participants that this candidate is not appropriate for us because this candidate is pro-life. The people saying that evidently just assumed that everybody else in the meeting would go along. They assumed groupthink. Jeff, who is a person of integrity in every way, to his very great credit, quickly disabused them of that notion and insisted that excluding people on the ground of their moral or religious beliefs was unacceptable to him. unacceptable for any institution that aspires to truth-seeking, knowledge-seeking, wisdom-seeking. That, however, caught the others by surprise. They were surprised that someone in the room would object. They thought everyone in the room thought as they did, not only about the issue of abortion, but that being on the, quote, wrong, quote, side of the abortion issue is a legitimate ground for excluding a candidate for academic employment or for admission to an academic program. So we have a problem. And sometimes it does take the form of conscious, deliberate discrimination against people who refuse to toe a party line. But I think that's not the fundamental challenge we are facing when it comes to reforming academic cultures and defeating campus illiberalism. In fact, I think conscious, deliberate discrimination is comparatively rare. I could cite some cases that I personally know about in addition to the ones that Jeff Stout has reported to me. I suppose others there in the room with you could do the same. But I believe the more fundamental challenge and the more difficult one is not dealing with conscious, deliberate discrimination. Rather, it involves dealing with something else. In this vale of tears, we human beings, fallen and frail creatures that we are, have a lot of trouble appreciating meritorious work and even good arguments when they run contrary to our own opinions, especially when we're strongly emotionally attached to those opinions, whether those opinions are political or religious or moral, or opinions about matters of science or history or what have you. Now, as I see it, this isn't a liberal problem or a progressive or a left-wing problem. To me, it seems to be a human nature problem. Anytime an intellectual or political orthodoxy has hardened into place, and it doesn't matter whether it's a left-wing orthodoxy or a right-wing orthodoxy or a centrist orthodoxy, it's just going to be very difficult for a lot of people to draw the distinction between work I agree with, despite its being, work I disagree with, despite its being really very good and challenging and interesting and important work, on the one hand, and work that goes contrary to what I just know to be true on issues that are important and are critical to me and are bound up with my sense of who I am as a, and here you can fill in the blank, could be a progressive, a conservative, a feminist, a libertarian, a Christian, an atheist, or whatever. People will experience challenges to the dominant opinion in a culture in which orthodoxies have hardened into place, often as outrageous attacks on truth, indecent assaults on essential values, threats to what is good and true and right and just, intolerable violations of the norms of our community. Now, my friend Alan Kors, Professor Alan Kors of the Department of History at the University of Pennsylvania, with whom I'm usually in complete agreement on issues of academic culture and reform, disagrees with my claim that the problem is a human nature problem, not a problem with the particular ideology that happens to dominate contemporary academic culture. He thinks the problem is, in some essential way, a left liberal problem, a problem with progressive ideology itself, not a problem rooted in what in other circumstances we might call original sin. Alan thinks that the dominant political cultural perspective on campuses today is inherently illiberal. But I remain skeptical of that claim. I think that what we have here really is what I've called a human nature problem, a problem that can be counted on to arise and to threaten the integrity of intellectual life pretty much any time there's an absence of dissenting opinions against an ideological orthodoxy in an academic institution, especially when it afflicts most academic institutions. So you're thinking not only the way people in your own institution are thinking, but the way everybody everywhere is thinking in these institutions, and most especially when it prevails in the wealthiest, most prestigious, and therefore most influential ones. So I asked myself the question, well, what should we do? Now, of course, as a dissenter myself, and as a member of a tiny minority of dissenters, I'm not in a position of having much power to do anything, really. But I would say to my friends who are on the more liberal side of the street and who perceive the problem as I do and who think that something needs to be done about it, and there are many such people, I would say, well, number one, of course, we need to strike against any conscious, deliberate discrimination based on viewpoint, just as Jeff Stout has done in the cases that I mentioned, that he reported to me. And number two, by both precept and by the example we set, we need to strongly encourage our colleagues and our students to be rigorously critical and to practice the virtue of intellectual humility, to exemplify it in our own work and in our engagement with others. We need to encourage people to be self-critical in ways that would enable them honestly to say, as I might say about the work of, for example, my colleague at Princeton, Peter Singer. Well, you know, I'm really scandalized by Professor Singer's defense of the moral permissibility of infanticide. But there's an argument he makes that's got to be met. And the burden falls to me to make the argument that our dignity as human beings comes by virtue of our humanity, or by our status as rational creatures, beings possessing, at least in root form, even in the earliest stages of development, the capacities for the types of characteristically human activities that give human beings a special kind of dignity and inviolability. The burden is on me, in other words, to meet Professor Singer's challenge. And I want my colleagues on the other side to take the same position about work by more conservative scholars, especially in these hot-button areas. But I acknowledge that that's a hard thing to do, given that we are fallen, frail creatures. And it's especially hard when orthodoxies have hardened into place and we aren't even hearing arguments against our own positions. When one is not hearing them and everybody one knows and everybody in one circle tends to think the same thing about a certain issue or body of issues, set of issues, no matter how really much diversity there is on other stuff, we're likely headed for groupthink. Now, when one is hearing the same thing from everyone whom one respects anyway, when one is being reinforced, in other words, in one's opinions by all one's friends and colleagues, whether one is a student or a faculty member, the motivation to think more critically tends to be very hard to work up. It really is. I think all of us know that. We have the experience of that. We shouldn't kid ourselves that we're above it. Working it up is so much easier when one is regularly, in the normal course of things, being challenged by thoughtful, intellectually serious people who don't see things just as one sees them oneself. So it's best, of course, for us not to get ourselves into this fix in the first place by permitting ideological orthodoxies to form on college and university campuses or among our circles of friends and colleagues. But if they have formed, then our challenge is to help our colleagues to appreciate work and be willing to say that they appreciate work that is meritorious even when they do not agree with the arguments or positions being advanced. Even, in fact, when they strongly disagree, as I strongly disagree with Professor Singer about infanticide and many other things, from abortion to euthanasia. I want to give a couple of examples of the value of viewpoint or intellectual diversity, again, from my own experience. One is the James Madison Program here at Princeton, which I have the honor to direct. The program was founded 14 years ago, and its impact on the intellectual culture of Princeton, precisely by bringing viewpoint diversity into our community in a serious way, has been salutary. It gives me enormous satisfaction that this opinion of mine is shared by many of my liberal colleagues who share none of my other opinions. They praise the Madison Program for turning what might have been campus monologues into true dialogues, benefiting everybody in the process. The presence on campuses of an initiative like the Madison Program ensures that there are people around who think different things, even about fundamental issues that everybody cares about, issues that can be divisive and polarizing, issues on which many people assume that all academics are on one side of. And that's great because it means that in general discussions across the university, and not simply in the Madison program itself at its own events, people cannot any longer simply suppose that everybody in the room shares the same set of assumptions or holds the same opinions. People know that the premises of their views will be challenged, that they'll therefore need to defend them. That makes for a different and much better, more serious kind of engagement that profoundly enriches the intellectual life of the entire community, of everybody in the community, whether they happen to be conservatives themselves or whether they're liberals or something else, not falling into one of those categories. The second example I'd like to share with you, again, is from my own experience, and it's the experience that I've had and that was kindly mentioned by Annette, of teaching with my beloved friend and colleague, Cornel West. Now, Cornel and I, we don't, well, let's just say we don't agree about everything. But we teach together, and even though he recently left Princeton for Theological Seminary in New York, he's coming back to Princeton next spring so that we can teach again. We just can't stay away from each other. It is, as he says, a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing because we are able to collaborate across the lines of ideological and political difference in the common project of truth-seeking, knowledge-seeking, wisdom-seeking, engaging with each other and with our students in a serious, respectful, civil manner, striving to understand each other and learn from each other, treating each other not as enemies, but as partners, even brothers, in the dialectical process of seeking truth, knowledge, and wisdom. In a given semester, one of our seminars might begin with Sophocles' Antigone and conclude with Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail. In the weeks between, we might be reading St. Augustine's Confessions and Machiavelli's Prince, Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto, and Hayek's Road to Serfdom, John Henry Newman's Idea of a University, and John Dewey's A Common Faith, W.E.B. Du Bois' Souls of Black Folk, and C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man, Antonio Gramsci's Prison Notebooks, and Leo Strauss's Natural Right and History. In fact, we can't wait for Wednesdays to come each week so that we can be back in the classroom together. We have a blast, which is nice, and we learn from each other. Our approach is the very opposite of antiquarian. We don't buy comedy by avoiding difficult questions. Rather, we look for the timeless meaning and contemporary significance of the texts we assign, the applications of the ideas and arguments they contain to contemporary issues, even the most divisive, difficult ones. We consider existential, moral, religious, and political questions that are important to us and our students in the context of the writings we examine. And here's the thing that really matters. The students learn, and they learn how to learn. Learn to approach intellectual and political matters dialectically, critically engaging the most compelling points to be adduced in favor of competing ideas and their claims and against them. They learn the value and importance of mutual respect and civility in the truth-seeking, knowledge-seeking, wisdom-seeking enterprise. They learn from two guys with some pretty strong opinions, neither of whom is shy about stating them publicly, that the spirit of truth-seeking, like the spirit of liberty, really is a spirit open to the possibility that one is, in fact, in serious error. Let me be more specific. I want you to understand what I'm saying here because what Cornel and I do really is, I believe, part of the cure for campus illiberalism. Now, I've always prided myself as a teacher on being able to represent accurately and sympathetically moral and political views that I myself do not share. So if I'm teaching about abortion, for example, or something having to do with affirmative action or marriage or religious freedom or campaign finance in the First Amendment or the Second Amendment right to bear arms or whatever it is, say in my constitutional interpretation classes or my civil liberty classes, I like to think that if someone came into the classroom who happened not to know which side I was on any particular issue, they actually wouldn't be able to figure it out from my presentation of the competing positions and the arguments for them and against them. Now, that's not because I think professors should hide their views or anything like that. Outside the classroom, I certainly don't hide my views. It's just that I don't think that classrooms should be used to proselytize or push a moral or political agenda or recruit adherents for one's causes. There's a place for catechism classes and the like, but that place is not the college or university classroom. The classroom is for exposing students to the best that is to be said for the competing views, so that they can learn to think more carefully, more critically, and perhaps above all, really, for themselves. So as I say, that's why I always, without fail, regardless of how much I care about an issue, present the very best arguments, not only for my own positions, but for positions that I strongly reject. That's why I assign best authors on the side of the opinion that, on the side of the controversy that I myself am not favorable to. What I learned in teaching with Cornell, though, is this. As good as I think I am at this, I'm not good enough. The evidence for that is simply time after time in the course of our seminars. I found Cornell saying something or making a compelling point in response to a point that I or one of the more conservative students has made that simply would not have occurred to me, a point that needs to be seriously considered and engaged. Had Cornell not been there, even doing my best to represent his side, the point would not have been made, and the benefit to be conferred on all of us in grappling with it would not have been gained. And Cornell tells me that he has had precisely the same experience, time and time again. He's found me making points or developing lines of argument that he says he's never considered, and which simply would not have occurred to him, despite the fact that he shares my aspiration to represent as fully and sympathetically as possible positions and arguments from across the political spectrum. So he makes me think, and I make him think. We make each other think more carefully, more critically, more deeply, often helping each other to understand that the issue at hand maybe isn't quite as simple as we had thought, or as people on our side tend to think. And what could be better than that? What could be more important than that in academic institutions? Now, all of this, it seems to me, is a very good argument for promoting intellectual diversity. Now, by the way, I think it's also a very good argument for team teaching. I think team teaching is a wonderful thing to do, especially if you have people who disagree about things teaching together, doing the team teaching. And the things in dispute do not have to be political things. The disagreements might be about the proper interpretation of a play or sonnet or passage of a play or sonnet in Shakespeare or any of a range of other subjects, especially, though not exclusively, in the humanities and social science. But team teaching is a very valuable thing to do, and more of it should be done. But the truly important thing is this: a healthy intellectual milieu, one in which the objectives of institutions of higher learning can be pursued and accomplished, met, is one in which students and scholars regularly encounter competing views and arguments, where intelligent dissent from dominant positions is common, and the value of dissent is understood and appreciated, where beliefs that can be supported by arguments and advanced in a spirit of goodwill are common enough that they don't strike people as reflections of ignorance or bigotry or bad will, and people who do not share them do not experience them because they seem so alien as personal assaults or outrages against this community's values. Now, it's great to have competing views among instructors in the classroom, as Cornell and I provide. I realize, however, that such a thing is a luxury that most institutions cannot afford to provide on a regular basis. But diversity among faculty on campus, even if not in the same classroom, helps to cure campus illiberalism. It voids the tendency of people, students and faculty alike, who hold positions that happen to be dominant to suppose that the college or university is theirs and is for people like them, not for people who disagree with them. It sends a message that all who seek knowledge of the truth and wish to pursue it in a spirit of civility and mutual respect are welcome here as insiders, sharing the truly constitutive values and goals of the community, not outsiders who are at best merely to be tolerated as if they were present in the community only on sufferance. So am I advocating affirmative action for conservatives? Not at all. I'm advocating attitudes and practices and the promotion of attitudes and practices that will cure campus illiberalism without the need to recruit conservatives or give conservative scholars preferences in hiring and promotion. If conscious and unconscious prejudice against people who dissent from prevailing orthodoxies were defeated, if intellectual diversity were truly valued for its vital contribution to the cause of learning, the hiring problems would soon enough take care of themselves. A historian such as Alan Gelzo would be at Yale or Stanford, hired by a vote group of people, few or none of whom happen to share his conservative politics or evangelical Christian faith. A political theorist like Paul Ray would be at Harvard or the University of Chicago. We would not have departments of sociology or politics or history with 43 liberals and 1 conservative, or more likely 1 libertarian. Nor would we have the embarrassments, and more importantly, the tragedy of campus illiberalism. In any event, we would be on our way to curing that illiberalism. And again, I thank you very much, and I apologize for not being there in person.
Hi, Ravi. This is Tori.
Hi, Tori.
We are collecting question cards, so just hold tight with us for a little bit.
I will.
One question is ideology central to the illiberalism you identify, since ideology is a type of learning that aims not at knowledge, but at the implementation of a theoretical doctrine into a practical pursuit?
Yes, if ideology is defined as the way the questioner has defined it, which is the classic definition, then the answer to that question is yes. Now, the trouble, of course, is that words are used in different ways to mean different things. Meanings of words shift. Sometimes, very frequently these days, ideology is the term ideology is used to refer to a belief system without the pejorative connotations of the term as it has classically, and I think it's fair to say rightly, been used. So I think we need to be careful about how we use the term, but used in precisely the classic way, that the questioner, I believe, is intending it. It's pretty clear from the question. Then yes, he's right, or she's right.
Just waiting to collect a couple more.
May I share with everyone some extraordinary news? At least extraordinary for me. As Annette kindly mentioned, I'm chairing the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. And our commission works to advance, promote religious freedom abroad and to lift the status and priority of religious freedom in our country's foreign and diplomatic policy. And we also work on individual cases, usually without a great deal of success, trying to advocate on behalf of prisoners of conscience throughout the world. And for the past few months, I've been dedicating a lot of my time, as have others, to advocating on behalf of a pair of Ahmadi Muslim brothers who have been held without charge, but for their religious beliefs and placed in jeopardy of their lives in Saudi Arabia for being dissenters from the Sunni majority orthodoxy. And the word has just come in over the wires, and I've just received it, that they have been released. So I can't tell you how excited I am right at this moment to work like this actually bear the fruit of two men released from prison who had been held there for their conscience beliefs.
Okay.
Next question. I'm sorry to have interrupted that way. It's just such a powerful thing for me.
Oh, that's okay. Would you speak to the growing use of non-tenured faculty as it impacts this problem?
Oh, I don't know if I have much of interest to say off the top of my head on that, but I am concerned about the use of non-tenured faculty, of adjunct faculty, contract faculty. It's not because I think we should fetishize tenure. I'm rather glad to have tenure, and I think conservatives right now ought to be thanking their lucky stars for tenure, because if we didn't have it, I don't know how long people like Harvey Mansfield or Leon Cass or Marianne Glendon or I would be permitted to hang around. But I do think that the overuse of extensive use, increasing use of contract faculty, adjunct faculty, non-tenured track faculty is resulting in exploitation of these people. People who are not paid decently, people who do not receive benefits like other faculty, who frequently have to make ends meet by teaching, one evening at Princeton and then 2 afternoons a week at Rutgers, and then making a run up to New York or down to Temple to pick up a little more teaching here and there. Of course, they have no time to do any of the writing that might land them a better job, a tenure track job somewhere else. So my main concern at the moment about the overuse of adjuncts and other non-tenured people or non-tenured track people is exploitation. I haven't thought about it in connection to the problem of campus illiberalism that we're talking about today, or the politicization of faculties. I just have to give that some thought. I'm very sorry for not having something worked out in advance on that, or a thought to hand. If the questioner would care to offer some reflections of his own about why he thinks that might be a problem, I could respond to that.
Do we have who asked the question? Okay. Well, we can move on. All right. How might one promote intelligent dissent in classrooms without inadvertently encouraging radical skepticism among students?
Well, first thing to do is, I'm getting an echo. Can people hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, the first thing I would say is that, as I say, I'm entering my 30th year. And every year since my first year back in 1985, I have run my classroom in such a way as to present competing points of view without ever declaring a victory or a victor, or one view superior. And I've not run into a problem with students drawing the inference from my method of proceeding that I must believe that there's no moral truth, much less that there is no moral truth, or that they should believe that there's no moral truth. Now, perhaps in part, I'm immunized against students drawing that conclusion by the fact that they all know, because of my extracurricular activities, that I do believe that there is a moral truth. But I do want them to think, not that there is no moral truth, not to embrace subjectivism or skepticism. I do want them to realize how hard it is to get at the moral truth, that it's not just obvious sitting there in front of our faces. Now, other people may see this differently. People may think that moral truth is the kind of thing that we instinctively, intuitively, pretty much immediately know. But I actually don't agree with that. So I do want them to come away from the classroom thinking that the issues are more difficult than perhaps they thought going in. And if I do say so myself, I think I've accomplished that, at least judging from the course evaluations. They come out sometimes not knowing what they think, sometimes reinforced in what they thought before, but understanding it more deeply, more critically. I suppose if you perceive the problem, and you're the professor, the problem that the questioner is asking about, people drawing an inference that, well, there must not be any moral truth because it's so hard to get at, and reasonable people can disagree about it and so forth. I would then do a critical number on moral relativism and moral subjectivism, and I would show how difficult that is to defend. While at the same time saying, of course, I could be wrong about that, and it's possible, I don't think very likely, that something like skepticism or subjectivism or relativism in the moral domain could be true. So you would subject skepticism to the same kind of analysis and criticism that other views are subjected to, which would, I think, have the good effect of taking that off the table as an easy way to deal with the fact that the student could rest more comfortably if it finds something to believe, even if it's the belief that there are no good grounds for belief.
Next question. Has Professor West or you ever persuaded the other of rightness of one of your positions? And if so, which issue?
The answer is yes, and and I can think of an instance going both ways. And what I don't know, and I'm sitting here thinking about, is whether it would be fair to reveal a view that I have shaken Cornell's faith on. I'm not sure that it would be fair to him because I would be outing him, and I would be outing him on an issue that could cause him enormous repercussions in his own, I'll use the word in a non-pejorative sense, ideological milieu or camp. But I think it is fair to say that he has, revealed to me that I've badly shaken his faith on a question that to lose his faith on it would put him in big danger in his own ideological camp. I can talk about my case. He's made me worry a lot more about the absence of racial diversity of the sort that motivates people who believe in affirmative action policies that involve racial preferences. He's made me more worried about that than I would otherwise have been. He's persuaded me that there really is a perspective that most Americans, now not blacks from other parts of the world necessarily, but most African Americans frequently have, that is distinctive and brings with it the possibility of making certain kinds of contributions to discussions that could otherwise not be made. Now, I remain a critic of racial preference policies. There's much to be said on the other side of them. But I can't rest as easily in my flat rejection of racial preferences under any circumstances as I was resting before Cornell and I began to engage each other on the issue. I'm sure if I sat here, I could think of more issues on which we've We've influenced each other, and that's good. I mean, that is evidence, and I think this is the point of the question. That is evidence that these exercises of ours are not mere academic exercises in the pejorative sense of academic, where nothing happens, you just have a good conversation. No, things happen. And even on issues where we haven't persuaded each other or badly shaken each other's faith, we've understood them more deeply. And that means appropriating them more fully. And that in itself, even if no one ever changed a view or had a view, faith in a view badly shaken, that in itself would be a valuable thing. The cause of learning, truth-seeking, wisdom-seeking would be advanced.
Last question.
Sure.
Speaking about religious freedom, what has been done for the woman married to an American citizen who has been sentenced to death in Nigeria for converting to Christianity?
We are working day and night on her behalf. This woman is Miriam Ibrahim. For those who are not familiar with the case, perhaps by now most people are, but she is a woman whose mother was Christian, whose father was Muslim, whose father deserted their family when she was a very young child. She has grown up in the Christian faith, baptized Christian, Christian believer, has never known herself to be anything other than a Christian, understands herself as a Christian, and is a devout Christian now, and was being held and prosecuted on 2 charges. One was apostasy, changing her faith, allegedly from the Muslim faith to the Christian faith, and the other charge, the second charge, was adultery, and she incurred that charge because she married a Christian man with whom she has now had 2 children. She was pregnant when she was arrested, and the second baby's now been born, actually. And the infraction or the offense there, they argue, the state argues, was to contract an illegal marriage because under the law, the Islamic law as they understand it in that regime, Muslim women cannot marry non-Muslim men. It doesn't work the other way. Muslim men can marry non-Muslim women if the children are brought up as Muslims, but it can't work for a Muslim woman to, it's not permissible for another Muslim woman to marry a non-Muslim man. We're trying, as is the State Department. Here I will share the credit certainly with the State Department and with international NGOs and with other nations. Everybody's working as hard as they can to bring pressure on the Northern Sudan to release this woman. It's really an outrage. It goes contrary to the Quranic teaching that there must be no compulsion in religion. The idea that she is a Muslim when she's never understood herself to be anything other than a Christian simply makes no sense. In fact, it's a violation of international human rights on everybody's account, everybody's understanding, to force someone to stay within a religion that they don't believe in, even if that is the actual positive law of the state. So we're working hard. We keep getting kind of mixed signals about that. I haven't seen anything today. We're all hoping that what has now happened with the Ahmadi Muslims in Saudi Arabia will happen for Miriam Ibrahim. I almost refer to her by her first name. I've never met her, but I almost feel as though I know her. But we're working very hard, and I think we're working together. We're certainly working across ideological lines. I mean, often I find myself in my role at the Commission being critical of the Obama administration and the Kerry State Department. But in this case, we're all singing from the same hymnal. We're working together, which is something I appreciate and I'm glad to see. And so keep hoping, and those of you who are praying, folks, keep praying for Miriam Ibrahim. She's a prisoner of conscience. She's also, I think, a tremendous example to all of us of any faith, of what it means to stand for one's faith. She's willing to be a martyr if necessary, but we certainly don't want that to happen. She's a mother of 2 small children, and she certainly doesn't deserve martyrdom, and those kids need a mother. So we all need to be working and praying and doing everything we can to get her released. Thanks for asking the question, which I appreciate.
Well, Robbie, thank you so much. I don't know if you can hear, but you're getting a good round of applause for your last answer.
I hear it and I appreciate it, and I thank everyone.
Well, very good. We thank you for your adaptability and being willing to give us your talk in this little bit awkward format. You forbear it well, and we appreciate all the rich insights that you gave us to add to our summit. So thank you very much. Godspeed, and we hope to see you in Grand Rapids before too long at another event.
I hope to be there. Please do invite me again, and I hope to see everyone at other events. Bye-bye now.
Let's give Robbie George a hand. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you very much. Thank you. You're getting a great round of applause.
Very much.
Okay, it's my duty now to wrap up quickly, and what I'd like to alert you to in the morning is we're going to have breakfast at 8 o'clock, and then we're going to have a seminar session with William Craig Rice and Jonathan Zimmerman at 8:30. Breakfast at 8, Zimmerman and Rice at 8:30 to continue our conversation. Thank you so much for your attention. I know that this was awkward. This was a first for us. I think you did brilliantly to be so patient. We appreciate it. We're adjourned.